All right, hello everyone. Welcome to another Tuesday edition of our WindowsWear Live. My name is Jolene Mujica. I'm the head of trends and tours at WindowsWear. And today we are talking about neon. So we're gonna get have a little discussion going about the neon glow, right? the the least subtle visual color in the world, right? So we're going to see some. Make sure that you adjust your screen so that they're at the optimum brightness, so that you can see all of these really sort of bright, bombastic colors that we're taking a look at today. So let's go ahead and get started. Again, as always, this is meant to be a dialogue. So if you have questions, comments, if you've been to these spaces, if you own these clothes, if you worked on these projects, feel free to chime in. We love to hear from our vendors and our brands and our clients and students with their feedback as always. So feel free to use the chat feature on Zoom or unmute yourself and ask. You can also use the chat features on, of course, Instagram Live and Facebook Live, which we are also streaming with today. So let's go ahead and get started. And I saw earlier that Stacy, I believe, said, "Oh, it's so bright, the colors. I think I'm going to like this one." And instantly, of course, it's very jarring, right? So what you're seeing in front of you is the perfect example of, just what it is we're going to be talking about today. And neon is something that it's one of these interesting things because we talked about primary colors a couple weeks ago and the sort of science breakdown of what a primary color is and how it's made and where it occurs naturally and what that sort of incites in you psychologically. And neon is the opposite of that, right? So neon is artificial, it is manufactured, it is chemical. So because of that, it has this association of a lot of people look at neon and they think tacky or they think tasteless. It's not necessarily associated with good taste because it's so bright and brash and incandescent, right? It's artificial. People often veer away from it because it can be a very polarizing thing seeing neon colors. But when it's used effectively, which I think we're going to see a lot of great examples of, I think can be really powerful and really fun, right? Not every color has to have a sort of very serious connotation to it. And interestingly, at one point, neon was associated with, neon's been around a lot longer than we think, right? Just in terms of its history and its etymology with chemistry and chemicals and the way neon is actually built. And I'm speaking about neon light right now, right? So there's two components to this. We're going to take a look at some collections of neon clothing and garments and accessories. And then there's neon being used in lighting, which we're seeing so much more now of in the visual merchandising world because it does set a very sort of fun tone. But neon, when it was first created, not only did it physically light up a space, but it had a specific association with it, right? So color, we talked about this with primary colors, it is interpreted culturally, right? So there is absolutely cultural associations made with specific colors. And with neons, we tend to think of things that are less than savory, right? Think about if you've ever been to Amsterdam, if you've been to the red light district, right? Think of what that looks like, that glow, right? If you've ever been to Las Vegas, right? Sin City, that glow of all of those neon signs. If you've been to Times Square, right? Very artificial, those giant billboards. And there's something very, at one point, Times Square in the 80s was considered a very dangerous and seedy place to be, right? So neon oftentimes is associated with things like that, red light districts in large cities, sex shops, and like this seedy underbelly of a city. But we've seen this resurgence of it to be a lot more playful now. And it's also worth noting that neon, by and large, is absolutely a color associated with a time frame, right? Some colors are quote unquote timeless, right? Black, red, camel, or beige, white, right? Some colors are very timeless and they can flow in and out of different time periods. But neon has a specific association with it to the 1980s, right? So if you were alive then, you remember this idea of day glow, right? And this 80s designer style. It was often like street style that it was done. And neon always worked best with other neon, right? And because fluorescent lights are like brash and bright and artificial, right? Neon pink, right? Hot pink, lime green, highlighter yellow. These are all things that we heard culturally in the 80s and were very, very popular, especially in children's things, right? So like in toys, and I'm thinking of like Nerf guns. Muted tones tend to be a lot more chic and intellectual in their reputation, but neon colors are always affiliated with fun and frivolity and excess, right? So we have to also keep in mind that that's like an association we always make when we see neon, as well as that we're instantly dating it, right? We're instantly thinking of a very specific time period, and it's used as a form of nostalgia, which I find really interesting. And fluorescent signage and lighting, which we'll see great examples of, it's also connected to, like I said, nightlife, right? So nightlife, clubbing, raves, glow sticks, right? Cities in the dark, particularly when it's combined behind black or midnight blue, right? And neon on the other end of, on the same sort of side of that coin, is also can be associated with warning and danger. So when you think of high visibility clothing and signage, right? Construction workers wear that sort of bright orange and that highlighter yellow vests. Day glow was actually this technology that was created to use day glow, or that was invented for day glow, was used to create high visibility jackets during World War II for soldiers. So it's always been used as something to absolutely draw your attention to. And in the early 2000s, we saw this like resurgence of neon. It blew up again because of, these influencers before they were influencers, people like Paris Hilton and Lindsay Lohan, who were wearing hot pink tracksuits. And then again in the sort of mid to late 2000s, when the electronic music movement sort of exploded, all of a sudden neon was being used in clubs settings, and all of a sudden the birth of the rave sort of took on this effect of neon as its kind of calling card, right? And now we're seeing all kinds of luxury brands embrace it, brands that you wouldn't think would, take on something so kind of silly, right? Like say Yves Saint Laurent, Versace, Tory Burch, Coach, Nike. They're incorporating these fluorescent colors into their collections, and I think that's fun because it's like counterculture, right? There's something really light and freeing and wild about neon colors, but when you pair it with certain other more neutral colors, it can be really cool in its effect. So let's take a look. These examples right on over here. We've got the Saint Laurent runway show, the Prada pop-up store, which was a collaboration with Macys, which we'll see a little later on, Versace's spring summer 2019 collection, and to the right we've got 10 Corso Como. And 10 Corso Como we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, I believe, when we talked about museums. Is a space that is curated to be a bit of a bookshop. It's a art gallery. It's a clothing store, and their entire space is all black and white, right? So when they wanted to add an element to change their sort of footprint of black and white, what did they use? They used neon. And it was so shocking to walk into this space that is all entirely black and white and see this bright hot pink and highlighter yellow and lime green just shocking the eyes, right? This saturation of color was really effective for them. I believe it's the only time they've really used color that strongly to tell a story or to sell a product in their space that's usually very stark in black and white. So let's move on to Balenciaga. So Balenciaga incorporated neon into their new store in London. So this retail space is located on Sloane Street, and they wanted it to be a retail warehouse. So they wanted it to feel very industrial in the way that they built it, right? Minimal gray furniture, metal shelves, system of conveyor rails that moves throughout the store. And in high contrast to that, they have this bright orange carpet and this aquamarine carpeting as well throughout the space. So they wanted that to be the only striking use of color. This space was several stories, but this burnt orange is what they call it, created this like atmosphere of almost being in a private space in public, right? We don't generally, very limited people have access to, retail warehouses and the behind the scenes of how things get made, right? But Balenciaga really wanted to create this feeling of you're walking into their warehouse and this is what it would look like when the product was being built, which I thought was fun as a concept and then cool the way they executed it, right? So this, the only color aside from potentially the colors that you'll see on the products that were being placed in there, was that pop of that bright flaming red orange and that aquamarine blue carpeting. Moving on, green is great because, when we talked about green back with primary colors, we associate it with growth and environment, and the artificiality of neon green strips all of that away, right? It's very evocative of chemicals, of digital. I think by and large, lime green or neon green is probably the brightest and most effectively used of neon colors in the retail world because it's so, there's just nothing like it, right? The saturation of the color is turned up so brightly that we recognize that it actually like glows in the dark, right? So for Berkshire on the left, this was a collaboration with Pantone. They partnered up with color expert Pantone, and Pantone considers themselves the authority on color development, right? And this capsule collection was very eye popping, and it was all monochromatic, neon colored outfits. It did quite well. And on the right, we've got Karl Lagerfeld again bringing in that neon green, and having that sort of lime green almost glow in their windows. And that effect, of course, is caused, with a combination of the materials used and the color and also the lighting. Lighting is really important with neon, because it will give you that literal glowing effect. On the left, we've got some packaging. It's important to note that I said this earlier, but like neon always works best with other neon. It doesn't work as effectively with a muted or neutral color. The one, I think, in my opinion, exception to that is black. It works really well with black, right? If you have neon pink or highlighter yellow or lime green behind black, it's very effective. It actually amplifies the glow or the fluorescent nature of the color. But I think Tory Burch knew that, and in a really smart way, Tory Burch uses their orange. It's very ubiquitous to their brand, but I think this packaging is really smart because it's neon on neon on neon, right? So it's green on yellow on hot pink, or yellow on pink on black, and I find it really effective, and it's really just kind of pretty without having that dated effect, right? Strangely, this to me doesn't feel very 80s or very early 90s the way that some other interpretations of brands have been. On the right, we've got Coach and Matty Bovin. So Matty Bovin is known for his fluorescent touch in all of his collections that he makes, and the clothes that he designs always have this like neon through line to all of them. Rihanna has worn his clothes. Marc Jacobs has worn his clothes. So when Coach collaborated, they took their classic C and they gave it the Matty Bovin spin, right? So everything is bright and sunny and cheery and fun, right? This is a collection that is not very serious. I am of the belief that not everything in fashion has to be super serious, right? Sometimes it can be whimsical and fun, and just kind of charming. And I think that's what this collection did. Louis Vuitton. So this was the brainchild of creative director Virgil Abloh, in collaboration with the Louis Vuitton Ideation Studio, and this was for the launch of his first collection. Right, we actually looked at this as large props in our talk last week when we talked about the effective use of large props, but it also fits perfectly into to our chat this week as well. And here we see a great use of Technicolor being reinforced through color temperature with that oversized mannequin that you see here, the yellow brick road. All of this, of course, was inspired by The Wizard of Oz, which in and of itself was like a modern marvel in its use of color. And the holographic mirrors that you see, that sort of pink that you see, influenced consumers to make the Keepall bag that year, the Prism Keepall bag. That was the most purchased bag of the season. So they used their neon to inform consumers to make a choice. Which was really smart because, psychologically they're saying, do you like the way this looks? Look, you can see yourself in the mirror. Can't you see yourself with this bag? And more often than not, people absolutely could. This was also a global campaign. So there were different iterations of this throughout different Louis Vuitton maisons around the world. The Recess pop-up. If you're not familiar, Recess is a wellness beverage brand, and they opened a pop-up, an experiential pop-up space in New York City, and they called it Recess IRL, or Recess in Real Life, right? And they are CBD infused sparkling waters, right? So they're created for creatives to relax, right? Created for creatives to relax and connect with others. That's sort of their log line. And that's what I call it the anti-Red Bull, right? So if you're someone who likes energy drinks like Monster and Red Bull, or you're constantly chugging a million coffees, this is the antithesis of that, right? CBD infused sparkling water is meant to calm and relax. And this pop-up was sort of playfully designed, right? It was inspired by the brand's own visual identity. So you can see that the cans on the left in the case have this kind of I know it sounds like an oxymoron, but this like almost muted neon color to them. I know that sounds ridiculous, but they wanted to incorporate the idea and the look and the aesthetic of the can into the lighting of the space. And when you think of relaxation, you don't necessarily think of neon colors, right? It's again something that's very antithetical to relaxing. I don't want to be in a space with bright colors where I'm getting eye strain. But I think this works for them. They created this sort of really beautiful sunset hued walls. They used sensory lighting. They had a mini Zen garden. So they've reinforced this idea of relaxing, and CBD, of course, being the part of marijuana that, relaxes and lowers blood pressure. So they did that effectively. And, blue is a difficult color to make glow, but I think they did that really beautifully, right? Like that corn chip blue color by using purple, right? Giving it purple undertones makes it feel like it's glowing. And of course, blue makes you feel serene. So for them and their business model, it's a very smart color to make neon and to present this particular way. Prada. So Prada had this moment a couple of seasons ago where they kind of did this complete 180 and went from being, very cinematic and very almost classic to completely going the other direction and going completely retro and fun and, ridiculous in the best kind of way. And it was called the highlighter craze, right? And it started in about like 2018 and has still sort of held on tightly through 2020. And the highlighter craze we saw, I think Prada did this specifically well. And on the bottom left hand corner, you can see a great example of how they understand that neon is a color that doesn't take itself too seriously, and again has this cultural association of red light districts. So they have all this neon signage in the back that's reminiscent of like being in Miami or being in Vegas, in the Art Deco district in Miami, meaning, or in Times Square, right? These big billboards. So that ties into their sort of cinematic element, and then bringing in all that neon into the runway. The collection did really well, and is still doing well. I see people wear these flame shoes in Soho all the time, and I'm like, I wouldn't think that anyone would purchase those, because who wants neon green flames on their, wedged heels? But it turns out a lot of people do. And then this was a collaboration that sort of tail spun off of that runway presentation. That runway presentation, by the way, was called Ultravision. And Ultravision to me sounds like something you would have heard in the 1980s, right? Like their vision of the future, right? That was for the 2018 autumn winter presentation. But this was a collaboration with MatchesFashion.com. They built this beautiful pop-up space. And they created these special rooms with Prada. They launched this exclusive collection. It was 80 women's wear pieces, 30 men's wear pieces, and it was complemented by this like expansive installation of animations and projections and moving imagery. It was all devised by Story Studio, and they reimagined what the Ultravision runway show looked like, or what it would look like if it was a store or a pop-up shop, or just a capsule, like, right, a moment. And I think this space is really fun. I mean, it speaks for itself, right? Instantly, you're like, yep, I get it. It's neon. There it is. It doesn't need a lot of sort of explanation, but I think it seamlessly blends physical and digital spaces and creates this like neon sensory journey, right? So they really wanted the spaces to feel not only bright and colorful, but that it told the story of the collection pretty seamlessly. They also had digital content that looped continuously on all of those screens, on all of the floors, which made this sort of impactful, shareable experience that you could get while you were looking at the collection and trying the collection on and purchasing it. Nike, this I think, in my personal opinion, was the most effective in its use of neon lighting, different neon colors, and telling a color story. Everything about this pop-up was symmetrically designed. It was designed by Robert Story Studio, and the approach of this was to create a route for the audience to follow using the visual narrative of neon light, right? So they really wanted people to explore and walk in and out of these doorways, right? The doorways between rooms are all geometrical openings in the walls. They were edged with fluorescent lighting. So you're moving from one space to the next, and you know you're in a new space when you have this highlighted sort of edging along the walls to inform you, like, you've moved into sneakers, or now you've moved into sports bras, or now you've moved into basketball shorts or yoga pants. And they use blue, green, pink, and orange in the smartest, most, I think, fun way. Like, walking into a space like this, instantly it's young and it's juvenile, and it has not a sense of humor, but because of the geometrical shapes, there's something very elementary about it, right? But they wanted, the Nike designers, the people who designed the space, they really wanted it to feel, even though it has that retro energy, they wanted it to feel like a futuristic world, right? And I think they achieved that. So strangely, even though, like I said, neon has a very strong association to the 80s, to me this feels really contemporary and fun, and bright use of LED, giving it like this hyper real glow. I think it was very effective. And at the core, every space was, all about product, and the products were highlighted. So let's take a look at some neon windows. Again, we'll see some lime green, highlighter yellow, hot pink, flame orange, what do we call this? Cornflower blue, right? Purple, proton purple, all of the sort of nicknames that we have for these neon colors. Here we've got Coach, again, showcasing really smart use of neon signage. Louis Vuitton just on top of that with their Wizard of Oz collection by Virgil Abloh. We've got Moncler on the bottom right. So this is part of Capri Holdings, right? So this is Versace and Michael Kors. And if I could use one word to sort of encapsulate neon, by and large, to me, it's maximalist, right? It's just a maximalist use of color and lighting. There's nothing, like I said, subtle about it. And I think this is a great way to infuse that. Versace, this was for their 2019 collection. The collection itself had a lot of neon built into it, a lot of neon pink, a lot of neon orange, and in fact their current campaign on Instagram is all lime green, and it's really cool. Check it out on their Instagram page. It's really neat how they've fused the future with the past, right? And on the right we see, there's nothing I could think of less that would go with, lime green or highlighter yellow than camouflage, but I think they've managed to make it work, right? So they know that clearly camouflage is something that's going to be a lot more muted, and giving it that yellow and green in the background just makes the color pop and it makes it a little more playful. Here we've got Saks Fifth Avenue and Bloomingdale's, again with this sort of maximalist, fun, and electrifying, if you will, use of color. And it kind of injects this element of excitement, right? But also note that oftentimes when neon is being used in collections, you'll see the time period being infused into the collection as well. So while these looks are from the past couple of years, they feel like they're from another time period because, again, we build, we use not only colors as inspiration, but certain time frames as inspiration as well. So you start to see, high water pants or, uh, puffy jackets, and certain color combinations will instantly kind of take you back to some kind of like retro feel. And so I feel like they did that very well at Saks and Bloomingdale's on the right. Then we've got Macy's on the top. That this was a journey to Paradisios, and this was for the Macy's Flower Show, right? So the Macy's Flower Show theme for this particular year was the future, right? A futuristic look at things. So often when people think of the future, they use a lot of silver and gold, right? This idea of shiny. Some things will be shiny and new. Maybe that's the psychological association we make of with like, spaceships or with rockets, right? That everything is very futuristic if it's shining, right? But they did a really great job of using that bright purple and neon pink to light that up. NARS on the bottom showing their lipstick. Not only did pink serve them because it was the color of the product, but it was really bright as well. And then Bergdorf Goodman literally just giving you these really beautiful actual neon lights, right? So that's what they look like. And if you've never watched the process of people who work in lighting building a neon light, it's absolutely fascinating. It's fantastic. I highly recommend that you check it out. I in no way consider myself an expert in that arena and can't speak to it, but it's very scientific, and it's very it's really cool to watch, all these big giant signs that we always see. We don't assume that they're man-made, but oftentimes they are. And then finally, we end with Harvey Nichols, right? Giving us explosion of neon. And neon saturation, you have to be careful how you use it because it can cause eye strain, right? That's generally, again, why it's complemented with either white or black to be very effective. But I think this is a really good use of neon over at Harvey Nichols across the pond. All right, that does it for our neon discussion. I'm going to go ahead and open the chat to see if anyone has any questions. Let's see. Yes, 100% 80s vibes. Yeah. Yeah, isn't that funny how, like, because neon was so popular in the 1980s, we forever associate it with that specifically. Whereas other colors can age and be timeless, right? I like a color like black has a lot of associations with it, but you wear it. People were wearing it in the 1800s just as much as they're wearing it in 2020. But neon very much has that like 80s association, right? People think of Saved by the Bell, like everything is just very retro. The Nike space is amazing. I agree, Stacy, that Nike space to me was so smartly thought out from the conception to the execution of it, right? Incorporating geometry with neon, which again feels kind of retro, right? Feels very Saturday morning cartoons to me, but it's smart. It's a very smart way, and yeah, nostalgia is absolutely associated with neon. I mean, think about Halloween, right? Think about when you're walking into like a party city type place, whenever you look at anything from the 1970s, you're looking at psychedelic patterns, right? You're looking at things that have a lot of roundness to them, a lot of shag shagginess. When you look at the 80s, it's all neon, right? Like it's all neon all the time. Someone from Instagram, you have an amazing eye for color. What's your main source of inspiration? Particularly my main source of inspiration. I'm very lucky that I work at WindowsWear. So they are a fantastic resource. I mean, what's great about that, and not to be, not to plug us too much, but is that all of the information that I have gathered is from our website. So it will be available to you on our site. And our creative team works very hard to put all of these visuals together. Um, and they do that in such a smart way that it makes my job really a whole lot easier. But yeah, I mean, in terms of inspiration, like, it depends. Certain designers, certain times a year, I'm like, wow, that's very inspired and that's very, you know, beautiful. But by and large, when you have an entire database of, information at your fingertips, it makes it really easy to feel inspired about any given subject matter when you can just see it all reinforced in all of these visuals, right? But thank you. I appreciate the feedback. Anybody else? Frank, what's your experience with neon? I know you work a lot in lights and signage, and do you have anything to add to this conversation? Not to put you on the spot, but
That's all right. I There's been a lot of do I have the camera working right?
yep.
There is a lot of neon in Times Square. As a matter of fact, some of the buildings in the past required you to have a mixture of static signage, neon, LED, and a prop. So there was a big combination for spectacular for a brand, which was a lot of fun to work on. So I've seen neon work. You mentioned that before, being made in sign shops. It's fascinating with the different gases and the different color glass, depending upon whether they were making, red, green, blue. So that's about it for me. I'm sure in some of the content on the LED displays, people have used neon colors, but I just can't recall any off the top of my head. But Times
Yeah.
Square is a good
No,
place for it.
absolutely. And that's the instant association we make with it, right? Like a lot of people don't realize what they're looking at is neon lighting in their signage. But yeah, cities like, Times Square, Vegas, these big even I use Amsterdam's red light district because it literally glows, right?
Mhm.
But it's amazing to see how effective LED and neon signage can be, and to echo Raul's sentiment, nostalgic, right? There are people who collect neon signage. Especially to sell a product like instantly when I think of neon signs, I think of beer. When I walk into a bar, I think of old school vintage signs like Budweiser, or that they had these really old vintage, beautiful sort of neon signs, hanging in a pub or hanging in a
Sure.
dive bar. But again, that's that sort of association of like, nighttime and activities that are considered a little nefarious.
Every once in a while in New York, there'll be a historical piece, like a museum of signage, and there'll be parts of signs. But in Las Vegas, they have a graveyard of signs, so it's a good place to visit when you're there sometime, and you'll
Yeah,
see
I
some.
actually have heard that. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I love that. Fantastic. Any other questions? Let's see. Scrolling through. We love these kinds of things. Thank you. Bloomingdale's does this all the time. Yeah, Bloomingdale's is really great about using a lot of fluorescence in their displays. Even, especially actually during the holiday season, we see a lot of fluorescent and neon lighting to give that amplified glow, right? because in the holidays, everything it's not necessarily just green and red everywhere you look, right? Oftentimes, in fact, it's not just green and red, it's a little more secular. But we can see neon being presented that way. And of course, to me, also the kings of neon in an institutional way is Disney, right? If you've ever walked down Main Street in Disney, or you've ever seen the electric light parade, right? They use light uh, to tell their stories very brilliantly as well. All right. Yes, Chinatown. Absolutely. That's a fantastic example as well. Chinatown has beautiful neon signage throughout that, especially uh, Chinatown in not Seattle, in Portland, I found to be particularly bright and phosphorescent in the way that we saw it. Great question, Alexis. Will this be saved? Yes, you can absolutely see this information on WindowsWear.com. As soon as we're done, I believe within the next 24 hours, it will be uploaded to our website, and you can see it there forevermore. So with that, that's a great, the Roxy Hotel. Yeah, you guys are now naming like some brilliant examples of like neon lights. But isn't that amazing how you don't really think about it until you do, and you're like, oh yeah, actually I do see that more often than I think. And now you're definitely going to notice it when you're walking, through malls or in stores, just how prominent it is in a lot of collections that we're seeing right now. So, thank you so much to all of you for joining us today. And again, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. And all of this information will, of course, be up on WindowsWear.com, including this presentation and all of these examples that we took a look at today. This coming Thursday, we've got another WindowsWear Live. Please join us at 3 p.m. With our industry member. Raul, who do we got on Thursday? Or John?
Hey, it's John. We've got.
Sorry, okay,
Go
don't
ahead,
got it.
go ahead, Mr. Raul. Tell us.
Oh no, we have Bob Volpe from IDW Display, which they an amazing mannequin vendor, and they have amazing clients such as like Saks and Chanel and so many others. And he will be sharing with us their must-have mannequins that they have. Also, Bob is big in sustainability, so that's another interesting topic that he will be touching point.
Perfect. So tune in on Thursday. We're going to be having a fantastic chat on mannequins and the future of what that's looking like in that fascinating industry. So Thursday at 3 p.m. Next Tuesday, I will be back Tuesday at 3 p.m. and we're going to take a look at the color of the season, pink. So we're going to be taking a look at pink, a million different examples. And then the following Tuesday after that, rounding out our month of June, our Pride Month, we'll be taking a look at LGBTQIA representation in the visual community. All right, so that's our next Tuesdays. Again, this Thursday, join us at 3 p.m. to take a listen to for a chat on mannequins, and next Tuesday, a chat on the color pink. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Stay happy and healthy and safe, and we'll see you on Thursday.